Otherwise, more realistically, in Japan, it's very uncommon that people still make shoes entirely by hand. In other words, even to file down the heels, they do not use those machines, that just turn around, that filing machine. No, they still use a rasp and glass and wool. I know one in England that does it entirely himself, entirely by hand. There may be a few others. And I know that Austrian chap who at least proposes the service. And I know that chap in England who directly does not propose the service. That is what he does. He does it entirely. So the shoe is entirely made by him. And even the stitching on top, if you mention it and you pay a bit of an extra, I think like an extra £100, he would do the stitching of the uppers by hand, which is extremely rare, almost inexistent out of Japan. And his name is Dominic Cassey. He looks like a man from that era, but he does cheat in that he uses prefabricated shoe forms, but that does not really change anything. So, but then he does narrow it down by hand. He does use a bit of no, he does not even use a machine. So he does narrow it down and make it into a specific shoe size and shoe form by hand, individually for each foot. And he is much more approachable because he is very sympathetic. He does not have a big head, and he does not just speak Japanese, he speaks fluent English, and most people are into that are actually English or at least American, speak fluent English. And he starts very low for bespoke shoes, so let alone for entirely handmade ones by one person. It starts on under £2,500 for shoes, £3,000 for boots, like city boots. And if you want to go riding, it starts at £5,000 because he has to make an entire cuff, a form of cuff, so much more work. But let us say you want city wear, so you want concentrating tensions upon boots, because you can still wear them in winter, even if you live in Scandinavia. So, I mean short boots, which only begin at £3,000. If you want the uppers by hand, I think it would be £3,100, as long as you choose a non-exotic leather, like a calfskin. Now the problem will not, and why pick him, is because he does it entirely by hand. The techniques have not changed since almost 300 years, and that is what he does, even in most of his shoes, which, like the ones he did for Kirby Allison, which are a modern shoe. But the techniques he used, like for parallel would have prepared his tailoring, the techniques, the sewing techniques, the thread used, he creates his own thread using beeswax in order to wax it down. They all date back to way before the 1890s. So that would be exactly what the upper classes would have done. They would not have gotten a factory shoot, they would have gotten a chap, but back then there was still many who did it the old way, entirely by hand. And why is it an advantage, double advantage for him, is because he also knows he is an expert at all the shoe styles, the previous shoe styles, even back 300 years ago, so obviously he would know the shoe styles. He would already maybe have, he has old antique shoes, he has models he could show you, and so I could make something like that. So he would not only have the correct techniques, but the correct style. If you ask him, he would exactly know what it is. He would probably know more than you. He knows more than I about 1890s, especially British footwear. The only problem, again, is the material. He only uses leather in his shoes. So everything is leather. Except if you ask him. Ideally, especially for upperclassmen and for 1890s, you wanted all leather. That meaning, obviously, the uppers are leather, the sock lining, all of that will be leather. The insole is leather, the outsole is leather, the heels will be leather completely. No rubber thing like they put now. They did not put there. You put leather, and then all the interlining for the hard piece, hard contouring, like the heel there, the heel contour, and the toe puff, and sometimes up to there and here. These all will also be leather pieces, harder leather pieces, sewn in between the upper leather, the leather uppers, and the sock lining. Sock lining means the lining here. This boot does not have an actual lining, but you get the picture. So it will all be leather, but that is the problem. Is the leather accurate? Back in the 1890s, they were using already the same leather, and today most leathers used are chromium-based dyes, but they did not chromium-based dye using the same chemicals exactly, and especially, or at least even if they use the same chemicals, not the same percent of each chemical mixed together, and especially not the same machinery. So an easier way would be to go vegetable dye, which is much better for the environment too, and which is now available a lot. There was a resurrection for the organic movement for vegetable dyed leather. The problem with vegetable dye leather is that most opticians will not use that, and also especially if you want black or black color, it will fade away quickly, and especially for the sock lining, if you wanted a color other than natural, so i.e. if you want it dyed and it is dyed using vegetables with the sweat and perspiration and humidity outside and rain, it will all transfer onto your sock, which would be annoying. So in such a case, do not dye the interior. Or you can ask him maybe to have some, and not just the dye, how is the leather treated? Is it treated the same manner than before? I do not really know about leathers. I'm also vegan, so I only get second-hand shoes. That is what I recommend, but if you really must go biz poke, ask Dominic Cassey, he would know. Contact him for his Instagram, contact him on no, he does not have a YouTube channel, he has his email for his shop. Ask him about the leathers, ask him and all. For the outsource, use many companies like Oakenbach, tan leather soles, that famous company. He does it using the same machines partly and the same ingredients and same methods than it was since the Middle Ages. So for the outsource, that would be very easy to find, but not for the rest, perhaps, because of what I just explained. So now for the gloves, you can go to Cadet, which are probably the most expensive bespoke glove makers in the world, but probably the best. If you can find amongst the reproduction community someone who makes gloves, which I'm sure you can find, he will make probably as good a pair, maybe entirely made by one person, which ideally is better, and it will cost a fraction of the price. The problem would be that you probably cannot source as expensive leathers than Cadet can. But again, as Dominic is going to the leather community, you can source that leather, like I said, for the clothing. More or less accurate leathers, more or less superb quality leathers that, for example, Cadet would have used. You purchase it, and even if you live in Dubai, most of these things will probably be in England. So you purchase it in England, you tell them, ship it to Richard, who lives in Canada, and then Richard, who lives in Canada, or if you're lucky, in England, he makes the gloves for you, and then he ships them to Dubai. You know? I think it is better if you meet that hypothetical Richard, because then he can actually measure your hand and make a better fitting glove. But if you live far away. Now for the hats. The hats I know more about. You can go option 1, which all the dumb dimwits would tell you, to go to one of these companies which have existed for many, probably centuries in England, but a lot of them have changed the family ownership, and so they changed their name. A lot of them have also come together and so they changed their name, and obviously in all the famousness, Hat & Co, Hatters, whatever, Henry Hats, one of the best, and then Bates, forget Bates, they suck, so I'm not even going to mention them, and I think like 1 or 2, max 3 others, who can still make gossamer shelled hats. Actually, I'm not the only one who's left who can make gossamer shelled hats. And I hate what I read on their website. I read, we use traditional techniques and then mix it with modern techniques to make a purely traditional hat. If it is a mix with modern techniques, Holly, how is it purely traditional? The reason they do that is because they find it more convenient. They think it boasts at their ego, and also they can charge you more money. And they charge you too much just for a gossamer hat. It does not have to contain gossamer, first of all. A lot of hats don't contain gossamer. There's no advantage of a hat containing gossamer except of making it more fragile, except if you go with a very strong riding hat. In such case, yes, but then you would have many plies of gossamer, in other words, at least 2 plies. If that is not what you want and you want a thin hat, adding just 1 ply of gossamer has no advantage whatsoever except increasing the cost because you're going with these dimwits. And gossamer does not cost anything. It is literally linen that they dipped into a solution based with mercury. They probably have less mercury now because using the same percentage of mercury would be illegal. So because it has less mercury, it is less strong even. And anyhow, 1 ply of gossamer is very fragile, even with a fur hat. And it has no point. They never did fur hats with gossamer hat. They only do that now to say we can still make gossamer hats. But the whole point of gossamer hats was so it could have a thin sheet of silk-plush. The silk-plush cannot hold by itself. There's no way. You can add as much shellac as you want. You will only end up destroying it. The shellac will end up melting it. So it needs a base form structure. And so they thought, instead of sticking it onto felted felt, which would not make it look nice, and especially it would still make a heavy hat, they would put on a silk hat so that it was more